Hello, Introduction to Philosophy. My name is Amy. I will be your instructor for this course. We are just going to dive right into this first lecture. So this week we will be talking about some introductions, which I just introduced myself already. That's where we'll start. I'm going to spend some time talking about what philosophy actually is. Some of you probably don't really know what philosophy is. Most people don't have an idea what philosophy is or what philosophers actually do, so we'll start there. I'm going to talk a lot about the course syllabus and the way the course is structured and what's expected and the readings that are assigned and all that. And I will finish off by talking about some tasks that are coming up this week and next week. So for starters, hi again, my name is Amy. I not only want to introduce myself, but I also am looking forward to meeting all of you virtually. So this week you're going to be writing an essay about your lives. So I'm looking forward to reading those and learning more about you. And also having you all introduce yourselves to one another by getting to know your group mates. We're going to talk more about that. But welcome to philosophy class. I know these are exceptional circumstances, but I'm glad you're all here, and I think we're going to have a good semester together, and I look forward to working with you from a distance. So moving on to what is philosophy. A lot of this material that I'm going to be talking about in this section is taken from chapter 1 of the book Ultimate Questions, which is one of the texts that we're going to be reading in the class. I will be posting the excerpts from that book on Moodle, so you don't have to buy that textbook. But this comes from chapter 1, which is not required reading, but I still think it's important, so I wanted to incorporate it into this lecture. So what is philosophy? Well, the author of that book defines philosophy as an attempt to make sense of the world, but he distinguishes it from other attempts to make sense of the world, namely mythology and religion. So how is philosophy different from these? Well, the author describes this story. He says, imagine you are a hunter-gatherer living tens of thousands of years ago, and you are sitting with your daughter, and she looks up at the stars and she says, do the stars care about us? And one way you might respond is to make up a story about the stars, to say that they either care or they don't care. But one way to attempt to answer your kid's question is to make up a story. And mythology, that's what you would be doing if you are just making up a story, just using the story to better understand your world and our world, but not really having any basis for believing those stories are true, but seeing them as a useful way to make sense of the world. So the author points out that mythology is not just a thing of the past. We can think about ways that stories or myths actually help us make sense of our world today. One of the questions he asks in the textbook is, what are some stories that help us make sense of the world? Can you think of a story or stories that you believe that you understand are stories? They're not stories that provide reasons for believing they're true, but they're nonetheless stories that are aimed to help you make sense of the world, that are still in effect today, that still affect how we think of the world. So I leave that to you to try to think of some of those. We're also going to be reading Ishmael in this class, which is all about mythology. So I just want to connect these two texts right at the start to say we are going to be looking. Ishmael thinks there's one main story that we are still telling ourselves that we don't even realize is just a story that's affected how we have everything about our lives, basically how we have structured our lives as advanced societies, and why that is going to ultimately lead to our demise. But that's all in Ishmael. We're going to get to that. But that is one way that mythology ties into that other piece of the class that we're going to be looking at. So the other way there is to make sense of the world that the author contrasts with philosophy is religion. And so religion also uses stories, but one difference between religion and mythology is that religion actually tries to give a basis for believing that the stories are true, and that basis is divine revelation. So Um, Religious stories or religious doctrines claim to have been inspired by God, by somebody within the religion hearing the word of God directly or somehow receiving the word of God and passing that on to the religious community. So, if you are a member of a religious community, then you might want to know, and this author goes on to talk about how you're still imagining yourself tens of thousands of years ago with your daughter who's very inquisitive, who says you provide a religious reason about how to answer her question about the stars. And she says, well, I met this other person from another tribe and they had a totally different religious view. So how do you know that our religious convictions, the beliefs that we have, that we believe were handed to us by God, are correct? And their beliefs, their religious beliefs, which are they believe are handed to them by God, but conflict with our religious beliefs, how do we know which religion to believe, which divine revelation is correct, is real in the world? And the author says, well, once you start to ask that question, you're sort of leaving the realm of religion and starting to do philosophy, because philosophy is starting to look beyond the stories that were given. And if we believe those ideas are handed to us through divine revelation, to ask, well, why should we accept one version and not another version? And when you do that, you're starting to ask for reasons for believing the things that you believe, and you're doing philosophy, which is trying to make sense of the world on the basis of reason, offering reasons for the views that you have and the things that you believe. So again, we have these three ways to make sense of the world. Mythology, which is based on stories with no basis for believing that they're actually true or correct. Religion, which does provide that basis, namely through divine revelation, believing that the ideas that you hold on to are true because they were revealed by God directly or through other people. And third is philosophy, which is trying to give reasons for why we should accept one view over another when we're trying to make sense of the world in this bigger picture way. Okay, so the next thing that the author points out is 4 different sort of attributes of philosophy, doing philosophy. So one is that philosophy involves arguments. And when we talk about arguments, we're not talking about heated discussions where you disagree with a friend. We're talking about reasons given in support of a conclusion. So philosophy is essentially about using reasons to support your beliefs. Well, an argument is when you issue those reasons, when you sort of set up those reasons in defense of the belief. So an argument has 2 parts. It has the reasons that you're offering in support of some belief, and it has the thing that they're reasons to believe, the thing that you're trying to support belief in. That's the conclusion of the argument. So the next lecture, when we move on to chapter 2 of Ultimate Questions, we're going to be talking about arguments at length. So this is just a preview. A second feature of philosophy is that philosophy emerges in response to persistent questioning. So think about the daughter asking about the stars. It's because those questions arise and you're thinking with a critical mind and not just accepting what you're told, but asking for why you should believe it and challenging the beliefs you have and starting to question bigger ideas about your life and who you are and the nature of the world and the nature of reality and what kind of person you want to be. These are all big questions that lead to doing philosophy. Another feature of philosophy is that philosophy is a social activity, which means we actually do philosophy together. You do philosophy with other people. And that means that how we're doing philosophy, the context in which we're doing philosophy, the fact that we are stuck far away from one another during a pandemic, which is just the strangest circumstances that I've ever taught philosophy in. All these things, including who I am and who you are, our backgrounds, our values, our character traits, our families, our upbringings, all of these things affect how we do philosophy, which kinds of questions get asked, who I've put on the syllabus in the first place. Um, all of these things, the philosophy that we're doing, the way we're doing philosophy, are affected by all of these different features of who we're actually, I would say, in the room with. But in this case, we're not in a room, and that itself is going to make a huge difference to the kind of thinking that we do together. The first article that I've assigned to read is about Black women within philosophy. And the reason that I assigned that is because I think it's important to understand other people's experiences, but also I think that this um, that article gives us a good model of how philosophy is a social activity, how someone's background, in this case their race and their gender, make a difference to how they do philosophy and how they've experienced their philosophical career. And the interviewee in that piece, Anita Allen, talks about experiences of her peers within philosophy and how they've been treated within philosophy departments, and particular boosts and barriers, the things that helped her get ahead or help people in general get ahead in life or in their career within philosophy in this case, and barriers to her success and her excelling within philosophy. And certain barriers arise that you might not notice unless you start to actually pay attention to them and name them. And so I want to encourage you, as you read that article, to think about your own lives and your own progression in your education and in your career path as you start to decide what it is you want to study and where you want to go in your life. I want you to think about those things that have served as boosts and barriers to you, ways that you've been benefited, ways that you have benefited from maybe your upbringing, your socioeconomic class, your physical abilities, your mental abilities, having a good education or quality teachers that were helpful to you, and other things that might have been barriers to you in getting to this stage in your education, which can be any of the same things I just named. So I want you to encourage you to think about those as you take this course, and also to think about those as you meet with your group and talk with your group mates about your lives over the last several months. How have those boosts and barriers shown up in your life based on your background and your character traits and who you are and your physical abilities and maybe limitations and all different aspects of your experience. And particularly, I want you to think about boosts and barriers in relation to your life during a pandemic, because that's going to be the focus of a group discussion that you're going to have. And I want you to think about how those different parts of your life, your character, your experiences have affected your experience during the pandemic in particular, and your experience of being a student during a pandemic. That's all in relation to how philosophy is a social activity. We're going to, through reading Ultimate Questions, we're going to kind of look at a very traditional, sort of some of the traditional questions and the ways that they have been addressed within philosophy. And then we're going to come back to talk about this sort of relational view of understanding philosophy as a social activity that which is affected by the context and our relationships and who you're doing philosophy with. So that's just something I want to emphasize and encourage you to be thinking about throughout the semester, is how philosophy is influenced by the social context in which we're doing it. And the final feature of philosophy that the author names is that philosophy leads to a plurality of answers. So oftentimes we'll be looking at a question that's centuries old within a philosophical context, and we'll be examining not just one answer. I won't be saying, here's the answer to this question, you should write it down and remember it for a quiz. I will be saying, here are different ways that philosophers have tried to answer this question. And so one of the differences between this class and other classes that you might take is that we're not going to be learning particular answers to questions. Instead, the focus is really on the questions themselves, on trying to understand what the questions are and to be able to understand why there have been multiple answers to those questions, why people have thought different ways about what the answers to those questions are. I want to say a few things about this point. One is that the fact that there are a plurality of answers within philosophy does not mean that no answer is correct or that all of the answers are correct. It just means that the questions are difficult. So we have to be careful about doing philosophy. Philosophy moves very slowly. We want to make modest progress because we're trying to be very careful and make sure we get things right. And so oftentimes it will take a long time, while many answers seem equally plausible, for us to discern, well, which of those answers is really most plausible and why, how can we eliminate some of those possible answers. Another thing about the fact that philosophy leads to a plurality of answers is that this means that oftentimes asking these questions is going to leave us less confident in our beliefs than when we started. So if that happens, that means we're moving in the right direction. It's ironic, but it's true. If we start to appreciate why people have believed different things about some of these most fundamental questions, then we might start to challenge our own beliefs, even those beliefs that we see as sort of basic components of our lives and our outlooks on life. So the fact that we can appreciate alternative views might leave us a little bit more skeptical of the beliefs that we started with, and that's a good thing in this class. So if you end up more confused and uncertain than when you started, then that's a sign of progress. So I want to encourage you to sort of lean into that feeling and welcome that kind of uncertainty and that sort of basic questioning of your fundamental values and beliefs, because that's what we're going to be doing in this class. So I'm going to move on now to, I have a sleeping baby who's crying, so I'm going to go do that. One moment. Okay, back where we left off. So moving on, I want to talk a little bit. This is Ozzy, by the way. Ozzy will make an appearance here and there. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the branches of philosophy, different parts of philosophy. So we can think of philosophy as divided into these 4 subject areas. Different people might chop up the field of philosophy in different ways, but this is the way I've done it. So one branch of philosophy is metaphysics. Metaphysics concerns questions about the nature of what exists. What is there in the world? So metaphysical questions might include whether there's a God, or what are minds? How are they different from our brains? What is it to have a mind? Those are metaphysical questions. What is there in the world? Are minds and brains actually 2 different things, or are they the same thing? What is consciousness? Trying to understand the nature of reality of what there is in the world. That's metaphysics. And understanding what metaphysics is can help you see how philosophy is different from science, or a particular science like physics, because scientists are asking particular questions about a more limited subject area, whereas philosophers are asking more foundational questions about the basis of some of those scientific disciplines. So, for example, a physicist might ask whether we should think that there are tectonic plates, or a geologist, while a philosopher would ask whether there's anything outside of our own minds, and why should we take the things that physicists take as evidence, like how a ball seems to be dropping, how fast a ball seems to be dropping when they drop it from a height, as evidence for the thing that they're asserting that it's evidence for. So why should we take our impression that the ball is dropping at a certain rate, or seeming to see a ball drop, why should we take our mental image of seeing that happen as evidence that it actually happened? And how do we know there is an object there in the first place? How do we know that we aren't just minds perceiving, thinking, having the experience as if we're perceiving things when those things aren't actually as we perceive them? So that's one example of a difference between science and philosophy and metaphysics, is understanding the nature of reality and what exists, and helps us understand how science and philosophy can come apart. Another way they can come apart is that philosophers are going to ask questions that observation won't always answer, won't always help us answer. So if we want to know whether God exists, or whether souls exist, whether we have souls, or whether it's possible to survive your death, for example, these are questions that observation in the material world and scientific data are not going to help us be able to answer. So they're a different kind of question. Another branch of philosophy is epistemology, which deals with knowledge and how we know things, what knowledge is, what is it to know something versus merely believing something, and how we know what we know, if there's anything at all that we can actually count as knowing for certain, knowing with certainty, or whether we should be skeptical about the things that we believe are knowledge. We seem to think we know things, but maybe we should be skeptical about whether we actually know them or not. We're going to be talking about all these subject areas at length. The next area of philosophy that I want to point out is ethics. So ethics concerns moral questions about how we ought to live, what kind of society we ought to be striving to create, how to create that society, what kind of people we want to be, how to be a good person, what it means to be a good person. Those kinds of evaluative questions that concern value and not just how things actually are. And the final branch of philosophy I want to mention is logic, which deals with arguments. Again, we talked about arguments at the very beginning. We said arguments is when you give reasons to support some conclusion, to support some further belief. And so logic is the study of arguments, of what makes an argument a good argument, and how we reason, and why some reasoning is legitimate and other reasoning is bad reasoning. Those are all questions within logic. Okay, now I want to talk about the course syllabus. So I have to move things around a little bit here. Let's see. All right, here is the course syllabus. There's a lot in the syllabus, so I'm going to go through the most important stuff, so it's important to watch this lecture carefully and maybe go back and watch parts of it again if you think you've missed something, just to make sure you understand what's expected within the class. So first of all, welcome. That's the first part of the syllabus. I'm excited to be teaching this class, and I'm excited that you are all here to be taking this class. I have a short section in the syllabus to begin with about philosophy and COVID-19, and the main thing I want to say about that is to please be safe. I hope you're staying safe and staying away from other people. And please let me know if anything comes up that requires you, that affects your work in this class in any way. So if there's anything you want me to know about your situation, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know what's going on with you and how you're doing. And you're going to be writing an essay about that as well this week. So I look forward to reading those and hearing more about your experience over the last few months. I'm also going to post my own essay so you can hear about my experiences. There are course objectives here in the syllabus, which you can read at your leisure. Okay, so I should have done this one page at a time, but I'm not going to change it now. So, okay, so the next thing on the syllabus is a list of the readings. So there's one text that you need to purchase for this book. It should be, you can get it used for less than $2. So hopefully that is affordable. So that is the text Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. I'm talking to this computer. It's weird. Okay. Do you want to get down? No. Okay, technical difficulties here. Okay, so Ishmael is the one text. You want to come back up? Ishmael is the one text you're required to purchase. The other text we will be reading a significant portion of is the book Ultimate Questions, Thinking About Philosophy. But I will be posting all the material from that book on Moodle, so you will be able to get it there. So you do not need to purchase that book. It's actually out of print. If you do want to purchase it, it's the 3rd edition is what we'll be using. So make sure you get the right one. And if you prefer to have a real physical book in your hands, which I think is preferable to me, but I haven't required that. But if you want to get that, it is available, though out of print. You can get a used copy, I'm sure. Not too difficult to do that. But I will be posting all of the material from Ultimate Questions on Moodle, so you can get it all there. Okay, so before we get to this schedule, let me skip ahead and talk about the structure of the course. Oh, no, that is not skipping ahead. It's right there. Okay, so the structure of the course is that we will be reading these 2 textbooks. And for the first one, Ultimate Questions, the main things you have to do are watch each week's video lecture, and those are listed on the syllabus by week, so you know which lecture you should be watching for that week. The lectures will be posted by Sunday evening of the week in which they are assigned. Read the chapter from that week and then take a quiz on that chapter. The quiz will focus on the material that has been discussed in that week's lecture. And the quizzes will become available on Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. and they will be due at 5 p.m. on Sundays. So, for example, the first quiz is assigned for the week of February 1st. That means the Thursday of that week, which is the, let's see, the 1st is Monday, so the 4th of February, the quiz will become available on that Thursday, and it will be due on Sunday, February 7th at 5 p.m. I'm saying that because I think a lot of you are likely to be confused by that, so I want to make sure that's clear, that if the quiz is listed during the week of February 1st, that means that's the week during which it will be available, and it will be due at the end of that week on Sunday at 5 p.m. Sundays at 5 p.m. are when the quizzes are due. Okay, the first quiz is due Sunday, February 7th at 5 p.m. and there will be pretty much a quiz every week after that until close to the end of the course. Okay, so every Sunday at 5 p.m., almost every Sunday, you will have a quiz due. I will drop the 2 lowest quiz scores. Each quiz is a 10-question multiple choice quiz. 1 point each, and I drop the 2 lowest scores, so your final quiz grade will be determined by your highest 8 quiz scores. Ozzy's very talkative. Okay, so that is the quizzes, Ultimate Questions. Watch the lectures, do the reading, and take the quiz each week. For Ishmael, the way we'll be discussing Ishmael is primarily through a portfolio that you will create with a group of classmates. And you, as a class, have been divided into groups of 3 people each. And you will create a portfolio relating to Ishmael, which involves 3 components, which I will be talking more about towards the end of the semester. But one component is a class connections exercise where you look for connections between Ishmael and the rest of the class. And a second component is an exercise where you will be assigned a theme from Ishmael, and you will have to write an elaborate summary of how that theme shows up throughout that book. And the third component is a poster that you will create, a poster including text and images in which you sort of convey the messages of the book to a general audience. Okay. So those will be due during the week that begins April 12th and April 19th, and they are explained within the syllabus more elaborately than what I just included, and they will be further explained in links that are available on Moodle for each of those parts of the portfolio. Okay. I'm almost done. Okay. A few extra things in addition to the quizzes and the Ishmael portfolio. One is that there is a final exam in this course. It will be a lot like the quizzes. It will contain 30 multiple choice questions, and it's an open book exam, so you can use any of the material that I've posted, or any material you want. That will be due during the entire final exam period, due May 10th at 5 p.m. And you will have a 2.5 hour time limit. On the quizzes, you have a 1 hour time limit. So whatever progress you've made, your quiz will be submitted exactly 1 hour from when you begin, or 5 p.m. on Sunday, whichever comes first. Brightening the screen because it's getting dark out now. It gets dark so early. There's an optional term paper in this class. If you choose to write it, it's due March 28th at 5 p.m. Totally optional. There's a whole lot of detail about that assignment in the syllabus, but if you choose not to write the paper, that's fine. It won't count against you. And there is a self-reflection essay due this week. That's one of the things you should be doing this week. It's due January 24th at 5 p.m. And I'm asking you to write about your life, what things have been like for you over the last several months, what the fall semester was like. So I'm looking forward to reading those. There's a description of the details of that essay also in the syllabus, which you can see here. And there are group discussions. So let me explain the group discussions. There will be discussion prompts posted in Moodle, and you are required to discuss those prompts with your group for at least 30 minutes each. For each prompt, you have 3 discussions you have to have throughout the semester. And you discuss the prompt for 30 minutes, and then you post a short summary of your discussion, of your group discussion. So The first discussion prompt is already posted. It's due January 31st at 5 p.m. And it's basically a discussion of your self-reflection essays. So I'm encouraging you or requiring you to meet with your group to discuss your essays, read your group's essays, your group mates' essays, and talk about your lives with each other for at least 30 minutes, and then share in the discussion forum what you talked about. You will also be sure, when you post in the discussion forum the summary of your discussion, be sure to include the names of your group members and the beginning and end time of your discussion, so that I know you spoke for at least 30 minutes. The 2 remaining discussions there will be several different discussion prompts, and you'll get to choose which one you want to talk about with your group mates. You can find out the names of your group mates by going to the link in Moodle called List of Groups. I'm going to show you the Moodle page here in a minute. So we talked about the term paper, group discussions, self-reflection essay. Please don't hesitate to ask questions if you have any questions. Okay? There's a lot more information in the syllabus that I will leave you to read on your own time. I just want to emphasize that you should be in touch if you have any questions. I will be holding office hours on Zoom, and we schedule those by appointment from Monday through Wednesday generally. So let me know if you have, if you want to meet. We can meet. It doesn't have to be a big deal. We can just meet casually to talk about what's going on. And if you have questions about philosophy or ideas about philosophy, whatever you've been thinking about, I'm happy to get to know you through Zoom a little bit. I'm a little sad that I won't get to be meeting you all in a classroom. So I just want to emphasize to please be in touch if there's anything you have questions about. You can also ask your group mates what the answers to questions you have as they arise, because they may know the answers. I encourage you also to consult the syllabus before you ask a question, because a lot of the questions I get, the answers are in the syllabus. So that brings us to the last couple pages of the syllabus, and I will leave that for you. I'm happy to accommodate any special learning needs or different abilities that affect your learning in the class. Please don't hesitate to reach out about those things. There will be an opportunity to evaluate the course at the end of the semester, so I will remind you about that. If anyone you know is experiencing distress, there are support services on campus, so I have links for those things in the syllabus. So please take the time to read this carefully. The first quiz will include the syllabus, so make sure you've read it carefully, because I will be quizzing you on the material contained in the syllabus. I also want to say that there will be a bonus question on the first quiz, and the answer to the bonus question is bananas. So once again, the answer to the bonus question on quiz 1 is bananas. Okay, that brings us to the next section of this lecture, which is the last section, which is upcoming tasks. So for these coming weeks, this week, the first 2 weeks of the class, you should, like I said, read the course syllabus carefully, because it will be on the quiz. Read the New York Times article about Black women in philosophy. Write your self-reflection essay and post it, obviously, and schedule the meeting with your group to get to know your group mates. And again, you can find the names of your group mates on the list of groups link in Moodle. So I'm going to show you the Moodle page now. Here it is. I start this page with resources for taking a course during a pandemic, which to me is the most important thing, is that you are staying safe. and that you let me know if anything, if you need support in any way. And there are links here to that provide other kinds of support as well. So take a look at those. There's a nice little music video here in the introductory section. The syllabus will be up here also in the introductory section. This is where you can find the readings from Ultimate Questions and additional readings that are assigned throughout the course. The class discussion forum, this is where you will post the summaries of your group discussions. Here are video lectures and PowerPoints, which haven't been posted yet because this is the first one that I'm recording now. So this page will look a little bit different, but here's where you obviously go to find the video lectures because you're watching this one, so you found that. Here I've posted summaries of the different Ishmael chapters and also the assignments related to Ishmael and the portfolio at the end of the course. Here are the quizzes where you click to take the quiz. This is my dog coming to say hi. Maybe you can see him. Maybe it's too dark. And here's where you take the final exam. So you can also get to all these sections over here on the left side of the page. That's really all I've got to say in this first lecture. Have a great week. Say bye-bye. Bye-bye, Ozzy. See you later.